Hey, good morning. Welcome to today's coaching session. It's one of my favorites. We're going to take a deep dive into the recruitment industry, make sure that you have an understanding of exactly how it works, what the component parts of the recruitment industry is, and then we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of how you can get the best out of the industry, recruitment consultants, headhunters, whatever you want to call them. Just one apology up front. I've got a heck of a frog in my throat today, so I'm going to be drinking quite a bit of water all through today. So I apologize for that. So excuse me as I splurge and splurt my way through this morning's session. I've spent nearly all of my working life in and around recruitment companies. I have worked as a recruiter. I've worked at the sort of the very lowest and some of the higher echelons of recruitment. I've worked on the high street, placing receptionists and warehouse people. I've worked as a contract recruiter, putting in computer staff for the year 2000 issue, which actually never really kicked off. I'd like to think it's all my contractors that saved the world at the 2000 millennium issue. And I've worked it out in other areas. I've worked as a legitimate search consultant. I claimed to be a headhunter when I really wasn't. I've managed teams. I've created teams. I've also bought a lot of recruitment services from a client perspective as well. So I understand how client pressures on recruiters often have a reasonable part to play on how they behave. And then finally, for the last 5 years on and off, I've worked with recruitment process outsourcing organizations. So creating solutions, but also creating teams that have delivered recruitment services to clients in those circumstances. So first of all, I just want to go through how the recruitment industry is structured, what it looks like, and the types of organizations you find in there. So first of all, the type of recruiter that you could be working for, we've touched on the headhunter. A lot of recruiters call themselves headhunters, particularly in social parties with their friends, etc. But in fact, actually, they're more likely to be database and advertising based recruiters. True headhunters now are beginning to call themselves more search firms, search consultants, because they actually go out having been retained, and we'll talk about retained and contingent work a little later, but they have been retained by a client to exclusively fill a role, and they put a lot of additional effort at the front end of their candidate generation piece. But then they can, because they have received a third of the anticipated fee up front. So that is search and retained. A lot of the headhunters are doing really, really good work. They're doing good, legitimate, honest, solid work. They tend to use other mechanisms to find their candidates. They will make direct approaches. So your phone will ring. You won't have heard of the guy at the other end, and they'll start talking to you about a role. But the process that sits behind how they have got to you is slightly different. And you need to understand that if we're going to get the most out of their processes and their activities. And then I have contingent recruiters. And this is the area of the market that probably is most controversial. It's the area of the market where behavior can be at its worst, but value can be at its highest. So it's really important. These are guys who are competing with the rest of their market to secure somebody a role. They have not got the role exclusively. They're doing it with a number of other recruitment organizations. And the way that they have been engaged by the employer actually often drives the bad behaviors that we all hear about with recruitment consultants. So a client may often say, well, if two organizations submit the same candidate, then we will take the CV from the first organization that submitted it. So you are driving recruiters to work quickly, and that in turn will lead to corners being cut. Whereas if you were to say as a client, well, if we get the same CV from two organizations, we are going to talk to the candidate and ask them which organization they want to be represented by, you get a completely different type of behavior from the recruiter. They'd want to build a relationship with you. They'd want to build trust, because they know if it actually comes down to it, you're going to make the decision as to whether you're represented by them or not. So a lot of the problems that we have, and I'm not trying to deny that recruitment's and recruiters' behavior at times can be questionable, but some of that behavior is actually driven by the mechanism in which they're engaged by the client. I mean, I've been in and around recruitment companies now for 30, 40 years. And even now, I'm still not clear in my head. It's a bit of a chicken and egg. Do recruiters have the reputation they do because of the way they behave, or do recruiters behave because of the way they're treated by clients? Certainly in my day in traditional contingent contract and permanent recruitment, clients felt they could talk to me in a way they wouldn't talk to any other professional service. Phones were put down halfway through sentences. I was often told to go forth and multiply. They wouldn't have talked to the people who supplied their pencils in the way that they talked to the people who supplied their people. But equally, I saw things and probably did things that were less than high integrity to try to drive through to a fee. So I understand that too. It's a two-way sword. But all that actually matters now is that as a job hunter, you are going to get the very best out of the recruitment industry that you can. There are two ways that you are likely to engage with a recruiter, maybe a third. There are two fundamental ways. You are either going to see an advert for a role that attracts you, that is advertised on a job board or sometimes on LinkedIn, or maybe even through a blog or something slightly left field, where a recruitment company is advertising a role that they either have on a contingent non-retained basis or they have on a retained basis. They won't ever tell you which is which, to be honest. Certainly they won't tell you if it's contingent. But what you will then submit your CV, and then we get into this real problematic area that we're experiencing at the moment. And that is that candidates are going through the effort. They may even be tailoring their CV for the role. They're submitting it to a recruitment company and they hear nothing back. Now, at one level, that is unforgivable. Absolutely. You are, at the end of the day, you are their product. You deserve to be treated with respect. You are the only way they are going to pay their bills. And yet, a huge number of candidates at the moment are not getting responses back from recruitment companies. That is to do as much as with the market as with the individuals or the firms that you're dealing with. Right now, recruiters are being inundated with responses. LinkedIn Easy Apply is, in one way, it's their best friend. It's almost also their greatest enemy. And as a job hunter, my view is that we just need to cut them a little bit of slack, but more importantly, cut ourselves a little bit of slack too. So rather than getting frustrated and angry about not getting responses, accept that as the way of the world and be pleased when you do get a response. Later today, I'm going to share probably the most phenomenal response email I've ever seen from an employer. It was personalized, it was considerate, it was empathetic, and it's flying around the internet and has done that employer brand the world of good. Recruiters may have the technology so that they can send you an automated, simple response, which is great. But equally, right now, they're under more pressure than ever. Only those recruiters who were around in 2008 have seen this kind of a market before, and they are struggling. And we hope they get better, but just cut them some slack and don't allow it to drag you down. So you've applied for a role and you have or have not had some response. So you have commenced that engagement. That's great. And we'll talk about how that engagement works through. The other way that you can engage with a recruitment company is you can identify them, and there are mechanisms to identify appropriate recruitment companies through Google or listings that you can find on the internet. and you make an unsolicited approach. So you are writing to a recruitment company saying, I have this skill set. I think I'm in your area of specialization. I'd like to know if you have any roles at the moment that would be appropriate for me. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with that approach at all. But in the real world, you will only get a response from an unsolicited approach under two circumstances. You get an automated, thank you very much for your email. If we have something that is appropriate, we'll get back to you soon. Or you will get a recruiter, or what is called a resourcer, who's the person who sits sort of behind the recruiter, but does a lot of the candidate engagement, calling you and qualifying you as a candidate. So your CV has pricked their interest, it's teased them, they now want to find out more about you. But those two relationships are very different. One relationship where you've applied for against an advert, you are immediately an asset. Whilst you are applying as an unsolicited candidate, you're not yet an asset. So you will not get the focus and concentration that you would get if you'd identified a role on their website and had applied specifically for that role. But they're the two ways that we would engage. I think the industry has such a bad rep, and in many, many ways deserves it. Absolutely, it does. We kind of forget why we would engage with recruiters and what is the value of recruiters, because we all hear the horror stories about recruiters being rude or being inappropriate in the way they manage your application, or being driven to the bill, etc., etc. And those are valid complaints. But we mustn't forget that we can get a huge amount of benefit out of recruiters as a job hunter reasonably easily. So there are four areas that we can get benefit out of out of recruiters. One, they have process expertise. They can help us work through the process of being recruited. So they know how the process works. They can advise on your CV. They can advise on interview preparation. They can advise on absolutely every single step of the recruitment process as you go through. Secondly, they have market expertise, and this is really valuable to you as a candidate. So they will know things that you don't know about the market in which you work, because they and their team of resources behind them are making 80 or 90 phone calls a day, talking to people who are working in your market. So they have great market expertise, and you are able to pull that out from them in conversations. So they will be able to tell you what is going on, and in turn, you can use that as an interview asset and begin to repeat some of the information, as long as you've verified it, that you've heard from recruiters about what's going on in the market, and you look as if you're really up to date. They also have client expertise, and this is the really, really big one for me. They know how a client works. They know the individual foibles and characteristics of hiring managers. They know what is important culturally. They know what is important in terms of skills and experience for a particular role. They've been briefed potentially personally on that role. And that client experience is absolutely essential. And it is one of the real challenges that organizations that are hiring directly have, is that they have candidates coming through their pipeline, half of which that are getting that client expertise from their retained or contingent recruiters, and half that have come to them straight through an employer's website or have been approached by an internal recruitment team, and they don't get that information, and yet they're going to be evaluated as if they're playing on a level playing field. So a lot of what we do in I Got Hired is to teach you how to get that information if you are a direct candidate. But that client expertise is key, and you should make sure you ask the questions that is going to pull that expertise and that knowledge and experience out, both when you are creating a particular tailored CV for a role, and you still tailor your CVs whether or not they're going through a recruiter. So any recruiter worth his salt who's talking to you about a role, and you say, if you could give me an hour or two, I will tailor my CV and I will get a CV specific for this role to you within an hour, they will wait. because they know that CV, when it arrives, is going to be a stronger sales document for them, and they're more likely to be successful. So just a little sort of pointer there that you must continue to tailor your CV, but make sure you capture all of their expertise, all of their knowledge, but it will only come to you if you ask the questions. What is the culture like? What's important to the culture? How does performance management work? How would you say this organization evaluates candidates? Just have those open conversations. The recruiter wants you to get the job. The only problem with recruiters is they want everyone to get the job. So it is highly unlikely the recruiter will have any great specific loyalty to you as a candidate. They have a great specific loyalty to filling the placement, but they don't necessarily concerned about who gets the role. But if you show, and we'll talk a little bit later in today's session, but if you show a real interest and a willingness to learn and a willingness to formulate an approach that will work well with their client, they'll really appreciate that. And then finally, and I think this is really important, you also have the benefit, if you're going through a recruiter, of their closing expertise. And this is how recruiters really make their money. And that is driving a client to a decision, driving a client to the decision that you as a candidate want, and that is to close the deal, and that is to help you close the deal. They will then negotiate for you. You have a buffer between yourself and the recruiter. That's really important, very beneficial too. But there are fundamentally, I guess, 4 types of recruitment firm that we need to be aware of. So first of all, there's the high street recruiter, Brook Street Bureau, Blue Arrow, etc., who tend to work at lower levels within the sort of employment pyramid. They do a lot of what that is temporary work, so hourly paid temps. And you can literally, or you would, in a non-COVID world, you literally walk in off the street, sit down with a recruiter, usually fill in a form and have a conversation, and you have a relationship. But they tend to only work at those lower echelons. You'll see the echelons they work at by looking at the job boards, which are on the outside of their windows invariably, and also on their websites. So that's clear. You then have generalist recruiters who, they may be multiple generalists, they may be multiple specialists, but they will recruit across a number of different sectors, technology, finance, operations, sales, warehousing, whatever. But their skill set is credible within those verticals, but possibly not as credible as a niche specialist, someone who works exclusively in your market. And as a job hunter, you should have a minimum of 1 niche specialist recruiter engaged in your job hunt. And you should diarize regular conversations with that specialist. You can do it on the basis that you are progress chasing an opportunity. You're just reminding them of your availability, but make that conversation valid and valuable to you. Ask the questions about, I've heard something about ABC Limited. Have you heard anything? I know a little bit about this, but do you know more? Educate yourself, use their specialization. Because it will help you with your campaign plan, it will help you as you move forward in your job hunt, make sure that you're moving with purpose. But more importantly, it gives you important information that you can use to increase your credibility in interview. So 1 niche specialist in every job hunt, absolute base requirement. Also, then there are the traditional search firms. These are usually middle to upper management and above into executives. They are conducting retained searches. They've already been paid 1/3 of their fee. When they present their shortlist, they probably get paid a second third of their fee. So they have financial resources to be able to do the job better. And also their fees are not at risk. Whereas in contingent competitive recruitment, it's a no win, no fee basis. So a lot of work is done by recruiters that they never get paid for. The complaints I hear most about the recruitment consultants are, he's just a CV salesman. And there's kind of this CV salesman versus a professional representation piece. So we want to be professionally represented, which is great. But the way that we behave often empowers and enables the CV salesman piece. So we have to think about our own behavior, and applying for inappropriate roles is no better than accusing a CV salesman of chucking mud at the wall, which is a fairly traditional complaint that we get. So in a way, do not treat recruitment consultants at any level, in any type of organization, as the human equivalent of LinkedIn Easy Apply. Don't just talk them into throwing stuff out into the market on your behalf, because you're creating a problem that you will then criticize them for. What I'd like to do now, just go through in a little bit more detail how we are going to we're seeing this or not. Let me just go back to share screen and try again. Let's see if this time I'll do it this way. I don't want to, I must admit I am seriously thinking about changing this piece of software. It's probably much more my fault than the software, but so I apologize for that hiatus. But so just go back to this messaging right from the start. You need to be very clear and concise about what it is that you want. That is really, really important. If you are vague, if you are a candidate says, well, yeah, I'll do this, but I'd also do this, I do that, I'm just looking for a job, that is not attractive to a recruiter, because you don't sound like a considered candidate. You don't sound like someone who's going to perform really well in an interview. So right from the start, and we're talking about another opportunity for you to use your elevator pitch as the heart and basis foundation of your messaging. Get your messaging clear. So it's clear, it's concise, but you've given it some thought, so it's also accurate. It's not just, I've got to say something, I've got to be clear, and I've got to be concise. Think about it first. Carry out your elevator pitch, use that as a base, but also think about a SWOT analysis as well. So you can talk about your strengths and weaknesses. You can talk about where you think you sit on a spectrum of competitiveness with other candidates. You must also keep control of your resume. It's your primary job hunting asset, and yet one of the most prevalent complaints I hear from candidates is, oh, he just sends my CV all over the place, or I don't know which company I have been submitted for because my recruiter won't tell me. There are some things that you can do to help manage that. First of all, submit your CV to a recruiter in PDF format. That will make it more difficult, not impossible, but it will make it more difficult for them to make alterations to your CV without your knowledge. In the old days, we used to call it magicking CVs. So long before the thought of a PDF or a soft file, there were people who used to fold CVs very carefully to take a candidate address or phone number out of the view when it was photocopied. And in those days, Tipex would be used by the bucket load in recruitment consultancies, because we didn't want our candidates to see the contact details of our asset. Now, that is a really important thing if you think about it, because while it is recruiters who have such a dubious reputation, sometimes it's the behavior of a client who tries to avoid paying their fee by making a direct approach to a candidate that causes some of the behavior and mistrust between recruiters and clients, and that passes on to mistrust and low integrity work with candidates. So send it as a PDF. You can protect your information, and you can make sure it's more likely that when you sit across the desk in an interview, the CV that the hiring manager is looking at is the one that you sent to the agency. Always keep a track of where and when your resume has been submitted. So you may be out shopping, if only, might be in the pub, if only in today's world. But you get a phone call, you'll be talking to someone else, your kids might be screaming in the background, you might be watching something on Netflix, and you rush through the conversation, put the phone down, and before you know it, you have made a commitment to allow the most important asset in your job hunting campaign to go off somewhere. And you may or may not remember where that somewhere is right now, but you can guarantee that by the end of the program you're watching, or the time you've calmed the kids down, or the time you've parked your car, a large percentage of the knowledge about that submission has gone. So you need to carry a pad and paper around with you. You need to keep track of where your resume is. And there are two reasons for this. I'll just do a quick ad here as well for IGH Pro, which is I Got Hired process and data management tool. It's phenomenal for doing this on the go. We talk about putting your job hunt in your pocket. So that's the ad, but a bit of paper works almost as well. You need to keep track of when and where your resume has been submitted, because the likelihood is that many of the jobs that agencies will want you to apply for, or you apply for you, will be with other recruitment companies. And if you have submitted your CV and another recruiter rings and says, can I submit to this organization, which is what they should be doing, and you have forgotten, or you haven't made a note, and you say, yeah, send it off. A number of times I've heard, I don't think I've applied for that. You then send out, your CV has gone to the same organization twice, and that is damaging for your brand. It's also damaging for the recruiter brand. It looks like he hasn't asked the right questions. He hasn't got a relationship with the candidate. But I know a number of times, and I've seen it, I wouldn't say hundreds, but tens of times, when there have been multiple submissions of a candidate into a recruitment process, and the issue has been settled by deleting both copies, or all 3 copies, or 4 copies, because the internal recruiter or the hiring manager just doesn't want the hassle of having to deal with multiple applications. So they just delete the lot, and you've lost an opportunity. So that first point, keep a track. But probably before that is the third bullet point. Only allow your resume to be submitted if you know who the employer is and the role that you are applying for. A lot of recruiters will say, I'm sorry, I'm not at liberty to tell you that at the moment. That is not true. I do not know any client, any organization I have worked for who has instructed a recruiter to not tell the candidate who they are. Recruiters do it for a number of reasons. One, they do it because they live in fear of a lack of integrity from you as a candidate. If I tell you that I'm going to submit you to ABC Limited, will you think, hang on, my recruitment fee, if I go through this guy, is going to cost ABC Limited £5,000, 10, 20, 30, whatever it is. I know what I'll do. I'll say no to him, and I'll submit my CV directly, and maybe I become a more attractive candidate because there's no fee attached. Recruiters are fearful of that. They're also fearful, and you will have had the question from recruiters, who else have you applied for? Now, or who else are your CV in with at the moment? They're not doing that out of a nice interest to see how you're doing. That is the start of a sales process. So they are looking to get data out of you, information, market information about who is hiring in the market today. And that's going to increase dramatically as the state of our market continues. So your response should be always be, I'm not going to give you permission to send my CV unless I know where it's going to. I'm happy to send you an email confirming that you are my chosen representative into that organization if you're concerned about me going directly, and don't send my CV in until you get that. But you have a responsibility to act with integrity as a candidate if you're expecting employers and recruiters to act with integrity too. So if a recruiter refuses point blank to send your CV without you telling you who it is, so they will only send it if you allow them to send it, don't let them send it. Their relationship with the client is poor. You will find someone better who will come along with the same role. If your campaign plan is appropriate, you'll be harvesting these roles and opportunities anyway. But do not just say no. And you should position that at the start of your relationship with a recruiter. I will only allow you to submit my CV if I know where it's going. I'd also like to tailor my CV for each role. So if you could give me half an hour each time you've got a role, I will always send you a tailored CV specific to you and specific to this role. After all, you are trusting them with all of your personal details, your career details, everything. So they should trust you, and you should push that. Really important. The other question that you should never answer at the early stages of a relationship, either with a recruiter or in a role, is, can you let me know who your references are? What they're basically saying is, can you let me know the people you have reported to in the recent years in your career who may be hiring managers, so I can ring them and see if they have any roles at the moment. That's what collating and collecting references at the early stage of the process. References are only valid or should only be given once you are at an offer stage and probably have accepted that offer. Never put your references onto your CV, because they will get entered into a client database in recruitment companies. And before you know it, this person who has trusted you and said, yes, I'll support your process, I'll act as a reference, gets inundated, absolutely inundated with recruiters who know that they're there, hadn't heard of them before, and will approach them as a hiring manager. To get the best out of the recruitment industry, you have to put something in. You have to be the perfect candidate. You have to be attractive, a commercial opportunity for a recruiter. And there are things that we can do, and we'll talk through those in some detail in a moment. But candidates who keep the recruiter up to date is appreciated. So if you're at the latter stages or considering an offer, let a recruiter know. The other recruiters you're dealing with, let them know, so that they are not going to waste their time bringing you into new processes, but also because they may be able to hurry up a process that you are in with them and push you to offer using that offer. Don't give them details of the offer, just let them know. Always keep them up to date with your circumstances and the state of your job hunt. If you just put a half an hour in your you're going to make 10 calls and just give them that. Let them know about the scarcity value of you as a candidate. If you are in process elsewhere, that the processes are moving quickly, that you anticipate being an offer, that you are very comfortable with the way that certain processes are going. Never tell them where those processes are, or who you're being interviewed by, or who the employers are, or what the role is, but let them know that there's a scarcity value attached to you as a candidate. Really, really important. Be personal, talk to them on the phone, don't rely on email. If you have the opportunity to go and meet with them face to face, which I know is challenging right now, take it. As a recruiter, I always worked a little bit harder for the people who I knew, even if I only knew them verbally, whose voices I knew, who would ring me, and who wouldn't, when they rang me, didn't launch straight into the, what about this role? What about that role? Actually say, how's your day going? How are things for you? How are you coping with lockdown? How are you coping with COVID? What affects it? Treat recruiters as human beings, because they are, and they're more likely to treat you as a human being and do so with care and consideration for your career. Take responsibility for your end of the bargain. So a process has several contributors, and you are one of them. Take responsibility for driving the process where you can. If a recruiter says we should have an interview by the end of the week and it's getting on to Friday lunchtime, pick up the phone and say, I'm not hassling, just that you said you thought you'd have an interview date by the end of today. Just wondered if anything's come through and wondered if could you chase it up for me. Help, be your own progress chaser. They are managing huge numbers of processes and candidates and opportunities. So take responsibility for that piece yourself. And always try to give a recruiter something back. They live and breathe off information. Never breach a confidence. Never give information that if it ever got back to the person who you've given information about, that it was you who gave that information out, you would be embarrassed. But you can let them know about things that you've heard of, things that is happening in the market. Make sure you're not creating your own competition. So if you are in a process, in a role with ABC Limited, don't tell the recruiter who's handling XYZ application, because all he's going to do is go and get that role and put more candidates in against you. But think about what you could give a recruiter that could be valuable to him, that isn't going to either breach your confidence or is going to create competition for you as a candidate. There are lots of things you need to do to be a good recruiter. Have essential skills for the job. Talk to them only about the roles that you're right for. Don't waste their time by talking to them, making applications, sending in for roles that you are never going to get. It reduces your brand. It reduces your credibility in the eye of the recruiter. Make sure that you have experience in the industry that you're applying for. Or if you don't, ask that question really on here. How important is industry experience? If I haven't got it, I'll withdraw now. Be well presented and a polished communicator. Think about what you want to say to a recruiter before you call them. Make sure you have a purpose for the phone call, and make sure that you can evaluate the success of that communication, phone call, or face-to-face meeting afterwards, because you had a reason to make it. So be very clear. Give them confidence that you will interview well. Talk to them about what you're doing with I Got Hired or the Job Search Accelerator program. Talk to them about what you're learning. Ask them to verify or ask for them to confirm advice and guidance you're getting from us. That will tell them that you are taking your job search seriously, and if they get you in front of a client, you're very much likely not to let them down, and that's important. Show passion for the role and the company in question. Don't just, oh yeah, okay, send the CV in, that'll be fine. They want people with passion. They want people who they don't think are going to draw through a process. So indicate your enthusiasm for the role they're talking about, just as you would to a recruiter, an internal recruiter in an organization, or a hiring manager. Be flexible on salary, but be precise. Have a range by all means. But if you say, I will not accept a role below this, do not then move downwards. It's like when you're buying a car, someone gives you their best price, it's got to be your best price. So, but have a range. Tomorrow we're talking about how to answer the question, what is your salary expectations? One answer it is not, which got a lot of traction on the internet last 2 or 3 days, is it's market value. And we'll talk tomorrow about why that is such a bad answer. Be as flexible on location as you can, but again, have your boundaries. Very straightforward. Try to make yourself as available to start as soon as possible. So either negotiate your exit with your current employer, or if you can't be flexible about, say, a holiday that's coming up that would stop you starting on a particular date, let them know, but be as flexible as you can. You would be amazed how often start date actually comes a criteria for hiring. So be flexible, but let them know again your limitations so that they know the parameters they're working with. Be easily contactable, really important. Keep your phone on. Have an email address that is specific to your job hunt, so you know that everything in that inbox is relating to your job hunt. It's not about, the Amazon deals day or Black Friday, whatever, or the football results. When you go to that inbox, everything in there is going to be relevant to your job hunt. Respond quickly. Working with pace in today's market is crucial, but working with precision. So have some kind of system, IGH Pro, an Excel spreadsheet, something that tells you what you have applied for. So when someone rings you, you know what they're talking about. Get back to them quickly. Make it a priority. You can lose out. on being submitted for a role because you got back late. Have a clear short-term career target. I want to be X within 3 months. They know that you're thinking about your career. They know that you're going to, that's another indicator of a good interviewee. So be able to share that with them, give them that target, and you can then use that target as a qualifier for roles when the recruiter comes back to you. And just be committed to the process. Let them know you're taking this seriously and you want to be a great job hunter. You can do everything you can to help. Most important of all, do what you said you were going to do when you said you were going to. That alone will set you apart from 80% of candidates. Just do what you said you were going to do when you said you were going to do it. Be reliable. Build trust. Really, really important. Don't make false promises that you're unlikely to keep. Don't say, I'll get back to you with that different version of my CV in the next hour if you know you're walking into a dentist and you're just not going to do it. Don't promise things tomorrow if it needs to be Monday. Just control your enthusiasm and your willingness and desire to please, temper it with some realism, and then deliver. Delivery is everything to a recruitment consultant. There are also certain things you can do that are just the cardinal sins, the things that are going to, you may not even know that a recruiter has written you off. You'll just think they haven't got any roles. But recruiters do that. They blacklist candidates and they will never get approached for another role. And sometimes, in all fairness, candidates deserve it. And what is worse than that is that recruiters, even though we compete with each other all the time, we also drink with each other a lot. You can go into certain bars in just about any city, and there will be a bar or two where recruiters mingle and they will talk. And although they're in competition, they do occasionally share advice. And you could get blacklisted across a localized recruitment community. And that's really, really dangerous. So let's just look at some of those issues that are likely to cause problems. Do not ever lie on your resume. That's the biggest no-no. If a recruiter catches you out, or worse still, a client catches you out lying on your resume and embarrasses the recruiter will not work with you again. That is almost a golden rule. Don't pull out of a job after a resume has been submitted unless it's because you have got another job, and they'll accept that. But if it's because you didn't do your homework, you said yes because you were in the queue at Sainsbury's when they rang, and the easy thing to get them off the phone and say, yes, submit me. Don't allow you have to continue with the process up to a point. But that is more about getting your homework about the submission right first. Pulling out of a job after an interview has been arranged, that's always a nightmare, unless, of course, it is because you have got another job. Not attending an interview or even being late, but not turning up for an interview, that recruiter will never try to get you into a role again. They are not going to risk embarrassing themselves. They're not going to risk their commercial reputation. They're not going to risk their professional credibility. So that is an absolute, and you'll be amazed how often it happens. Don't share the confidential information they have given you with another agent. You know when it's confidential and you know when it's just public domain market knowledge. Do not share confidential information. Always you can pull out of a process. But you have to give them a reason. It has to be legitimate. You don't just disappear on a recruiter, because you never know when you're going to need them again. You never know who they're talking to. They're talking to both employers and other recruiters. And that blacklisting thing is real, even if the recruitment industry doesn't like to admit it. It's absolutely, I've seen it. It's absolutely real. You're going to have a really good reason to pull out of a job offer once you've accepted it. That is an absolute no-no. So if you are managing your negotiation process and your decisioning process correctly, it should not happen. But basically, you're just taking money out of the recruiter's pocket that he's already budgeted or she's already budgeted for. So just that's a no-no. Resigning early in a new placement. If there is a real reason, the job isn't what you thought it was, you were oversold it, but you talk to the recruiter first. You let them know what your plan is. You don't want them to the first they hear that you have left is from their client. That is a conversation that no recruiter ever wants to have. Do everything you can to pass your probationary period, but you can do that anyway. And with our 100-day plan and looking at your employee brand, that's kind of a given. To not be contactable, to disappear, to not return calls and emails. Time is money literally to an agent, but it's a job to you. You don't want to miss out on the perfect opportunity that you would have got because you just didn't bother to get back for 2 or 3 days. So be proactive, be flexible, and be dynamic. Be a dynamic job hunter. And then finally, not doing what you said you do when you said you would do it. So that one comes back and bites us. Just do what you said you're going to do. Simple as that. Let the recruiter trust you. Believe in your credibility. Really, really important. So let's go back to the screen. That's going to work. Here we go. Okay. So that's today's session. I hope it's been useful. I know there's a lot of negativity out there about recruiters, but use them and use them intelligently, and they will be a massive asset for your job hunt. Tomorrow, we're going to look at how you answer the question, what is your salary requirement, which is a slight tweak on the syllabus. We were going to talk about the new normal interview process, but there's been a lot of stuff coming up about how you answer this salary question. So we just swap that around, and we're going to do that tomorrow. I look forward to seeing you in the morning. Cheers. Bye.